Hey guys, it's Faye with Lost to Wandering. This is another installment in the YouTube Pagan Challenge. This would be week 6, so what are your cultural influences and how do they affect your practice? I'm really excited. Oh, I have like these notes. I'm trying to like stay on task today. So that if I look down, that's what I'm looking at. I'm really actually excited about this topic because it kind of goes along with how I found this path. Like, I found it because I was looking in my hereditary history for some sort of viable religion that I could kind of take on, or spirituality that I could take on for myself, and still feel connected, because for some reason I have a lot of reverence for history, and I have a lot of reverence for, like, stories from my family that have been passed down, and, practices that seemed kind of weird now that I think of it. Yeah, so I mean, I have a lot to say on this subject. I'm gonna try and keep it short. I have done this video or this topic before, and that video will be in the description box below. Sorry. This is hopefully going to be somewhat more of an update, because in that video I basically talked about like all these stories that have been passed on and all this crap that like I believed because of someone, and I'll get into that in a minute. But this is an update because I have more information, some hard evidence for or against in some cases, and just kind of get into a little bit of what that means and stuff like that. So basically what it comes down to is about 4 months ago, my grandmother, who was still living in Arizona at the time, she got a DNA test from Ancestry. There have been, in my like other video, I've talked about how there have been like whispers of possible Native American ancestry and Romani ancestry. The only one of which you can really prove is, like without a shadow of a doubt, is the Native American ancestry, and I'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, so she got it back. She found out she's not Native American. So since then I've decided to use the Native American practice as kind of a basis, because shamanism is something that I very much want to incorporate, and that is a shamanistic practice in my region. If I was in Australia, I'd probably incorporate some Aboriginal practices, or you know, something like that, or not practices, but like as a basis. So like I kind of use what they do as like an outline, and I just fill it in with different cultural influences that I feel like fit in that subject matter or whatever. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with that. Not Native American. She came back at like 14% British Isles, like 12% Irish and Scottish or whatever, 56% Western European, which is higher than the average Western European, 36% I want to say, Western or Eastern European, and specifically, like, it was really isolated with things like in the area of like Transylvania and that area, Romania in general, and it kind of dipped down into the into Turkey and Greece. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's probably where the like idea of Romani came from, right? Honestly, I believe that most people in Eastern Europe are probably somewhat Romani. It's I know that they did try to they did do a very rough kind of cleansing process with their Romanis, where they tried to force them to integrate. So there's probably some Romani in all Eastern Europeans in general. Anyways, like 2 or 3% Finnish and Russian, and then 2 or 3% Scandinavian in general. So Finland and Russia they're ethnically the same, essentially. And that was kind of the extent of it on hers. I got a DNA test about 2 months ago, and it kind of all went along with that. I mean, I was a little bit more Eastern European than my grandmother, a little bit less Western European than my grandmother, a little bit more Irish than I would have thought. Almost more than, I think I'm 14% Irish, and she's 12%, so I'm more Irish than you. Anyways, less English than I thought I would be, considering that my mother has a genealogical chart that dates back to freaking Lady Godiva, and they came here on the Mayflower. Like, John Smith is my ancestor, so like legit my ancestor. So we came over on the Mayflower as the English people, and we kept the Smith name for a really long time. My grandmother's maiden name is Smith, so there's that. My mother's biological father's name is Ingram, so that's Welsh, so it's kind of English, right? But yeah, I did have a discrepancy though in my DNA, and keep in mind that Ancestry only goes back about 10 generations or so. I think that's all that they can guarantee or whatever. But I did come back about 10% Western Asian. For those of you who don't know where Western Asia is, let me just pull this up. Western Asia is located in the areas with which these nations are: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Cyprus, Georgia, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Palestine, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, and Yemen. So basically I'm Middle Eastern, like 10%. So, which doesn't make much sense because I burn like a British person. But I mean, I don't know, I thought that was kind of cool. I told my friend Joey, and my friend Joey was like, you should look into Babylonian culture then. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. But it also includes Greece and southern Italy, so it might not even be specifically those areas. But that just means that at some point they were further into the Middle East than your average Joe, I guess. So that's something that I thought was really interesting. I still have some questions. In my mother's genealogical chart, supposedly, in theory, there's a Chinese ancestor in there somewhere. I have a feeling that, and I don't know because I haven't seen it. My mother says that she's seen it. My mother says that my grandmother and her have talked at length about it. I don't know at what point in time this took place, like this coupling took place, but I have a feeling that this person was probably the spoils of war over the spice routes during the Crusades. So we're probably not legitimate issue. That's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. Again, I also don't even know, like, I know that my mother says this person is Chinese. I also know that people who are ignorant about the Eastern cultures and stuff like that, they don't really realize that just because something sounds Asian does not mean that they're necessarily Chinese. They could be Japanese, they could be Korean, they could be Taiwanese, they could be Filipino, they could, like, it could be any one of those things. But my mom did live in Japan for like a year or two, so I do feel pretty confident that she would recognize it if it sounded Japanese. But if that is the time, like, I'd have to look at it and first look at the time period in which this supposed coupling took place, and then or probably first off, I'd look at the name and decide whether or not it was, in fact, Asiatic. It might not be. It could be Middle Eastern. And it could be a lot further down in the tree than we think. I don't know. But I'd have to look at it, and I have some more research that I need to do. But that's kind of where I'm at as far as, like, what I want to incorporate, because that's something that I hereditarily own. As far as, like, the Romani whispers, I feel like you can't really prove that unless you have Indian ancestry. I want to do the 23andMe because supposedly they go back a little bit further. Apparently they can tell you how much of what original species of human you are. I think they narrowed it down to 3: the Denisovans, the Neanderthals, and the Homo sapiens. I don't know why that one took me so long. That's what the majority of all of us are anyways, supposedly. But they apparently, like, mixed and mingled a lot, and that's why we have, like, this hybrid human thing going on now. But yeah, so I really want to get into 23andMe and see if it goes back a little bit further, if I do have any Indian ancestry. From the area that I'm at, it's kind of sandwiched by those 2 areas, so surely I have some of either of those. By, like, you know, Egypt and that area, and then, you know, everywhere else. But, yeah. So I want to do that within the next 5 years or so. That's probably not going to happen anytime soon because it is pretty expensive. But, I'm very curious. I'd love to incorporate that in some way in my practice as well. I do have to do a bit more research in my Chinese ancestry, but I do feel pretty confident in the Romani ancestry just because of certain things that take place in Romani culture that took place in conversations with my grandmother, between my grandmother and myself, and my father and myself. Like, for example, I was told from a very young age that even if you like a boy, if he asks you out, you do not say yes the first 3 times, because you want to, it's almost like with the idea in mind that you have to sell yourself at a much higher price, or like you have to have more value for yourself than just the first guy that comes along, essentially. Another idea is, like, if he keeps coming back, then that means that he's very serious, that it's not just about sex or, like, just trying to get into your panties. It's about they're interested in you as a person, so they keep asking you out, and regardless of how many times you say no, you're still that important to them. So it's kind of like a measure of your value in their eyes, as well as establishing your value to them. I think it's also got a little bit to do with it's like kind of a manipulation tactic, where if a guy, like, comes to you and he says, hey, do you want to go out sometime, and you say no, and then they ask you again and you say no, the first few times or so it might be just like, oh, well, she's pretty and blah, 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 but, like, it kind of gives you time to, like, become friends, I guess, and get acquainted, essentially, so that even if their original intent was to have sex with you and then leave you in the end, it kind of sets up this forced courtship, kind of. So it had a lot of uses, and that's something that I ended up doing, and I've been in this relationship with this particular guy for 6 years, so it looks like we're in it for the long haul. I don't know. It's worked for me. I feel like I'm gonna pass that on to my children. I don't know. But I remember when I was younger, it doesn't really work. I mean, you'd think it wouldn't work very well in this culture because that's how you put yourself out there these days. But in my family, you don't play with that at all. You don't date and risk that he's not really interested in you, that all he's interested in is use of you. So I kind of liked that. My grandmother told me that when I was pretty young. My father told me, well, my father's always been very protective. More so than your average father. Like, extremely protective. Those are some things that are pretty common in Romani culture to this day. So, I don't know what to say about that. I'm like 98% sure that that's true then, especially considering my great-grandmother on her deathbed, like, she said my father was Romani first, and then she lied for years and years and years and years, and then she said it again on her deathbed. So I'm assuming, like, coming out with all these truths, she must have been telling the truth. Another thing is, he was a moonshiner in West Virginia. One of the largest accumulations of Romanis in North America is in West Virginia, and they do, to this day, kind of have a moonshine business thing going on. Like, I mean, at least it may not be a business, but it's definitely something that they do to this day. So, I'm inclined to believe it. Another thing is, like, moonshiners changed their names a lot during the Prohibition, to kind of hide out from the law and keep other family, like, out of it, I guess. So the last name that we have on file is Olszewski, which is Polish. There's an Eastern European. So that's, like, the majority of the information that I've got, but I'm fairly confident that based on the information, I mean, I couldn't say for a fact, yes, I'm definitely Romani, but I can say, like, I strongly believe that based off of everything that's put forth. So that's something that I'm also going to very strongly incorporate. And how that, like, affects my practice today, honestly, like, my matron and patrons, which I guess I get into in a different week. But I found them through this research that I've done, and through, well, not necessarily through it, but, like, some of them are, like, one of them is reaffirmed. I didn't really feel very attached to this deity until I got my DNA test back, and I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. I totally feel justified in having him as a deity then. My other deity was found through a lot of the research in Romani culture and spiritual practices. But yeah, that's essentially kind of where I'm at right now. As far as, like, how I incorporate it, a lot of my practice is just done through research and documenting it, so it all goes kind of in that book over there. My book of shadows, which we'll go over in another week, I think week 21, so hold your horses, keep your pants on. But, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know how else to describe my cultural influences, but anyways, thank you for watching. I love you guys. Keep on wandering. Bye.